Hey, Alli, where do you get your information about women's health?
There's so much information in so many places. Thankfully, you and I are experts in this field, so we may have different avenues to get information. But for most of our listeners, it can be really confusing and overwhelming. And thankfully, today we have our guest, Miss Ann Marie McQueen, who is a journalist and the founder of Hot Flash Inc. podcast. And she's going to share with us where and how to get the best information about our health.
And before we dive in, let's give a shout out to Judy Perdomo. Thanks for listening. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, where we dive deep into pressing health and fitness issues facing aging women. I'm Alli Kerr.
And I'm Shawna Kaminski. And together we'll bring candid conversations, expert advice, and personal stories that will inspire and empower you on your own wellness journey.
Ann Marie, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a truly global endeavor we're doing here.
I was just going to say yes. And maybe you could just share a little bit about where you're at, and then we're going to dive into where you've been and where you're going.
Well, I'm Canadian, but I live in the United Arab Emirates. I live in Abu Dhabi, which is getting a lot of attention these days. I've lived here for 17 years, but people really know where it is now. And it's July and it's about 100 degrees.
Wow. And I thought it was hot here in Georgia, but wow,
Yeah,
that sounds rough.
I think we got you.
You're actually
For
Canadian.
sure.
Yeah.
And where in Canada?
Well, I'm from London, Ontario, Canada. And then, journalism, you've got to kind of go where the jobs are. So I was in the small towns around southwestern Ontario, like Tillsonburg and Woodstock, and then worked in Toronto at Dow Jones and Wall Street Journal. And then I was at the Ottawa Sun for 8 years as a columnist. And then I heard that this newspaper was opening in Abu Dhabi. The Sheikh wanted a newspaper, sort of a soft power thing, because Abu Dhabi was shaping up then. They're very, very smart here. And they hired a great English editor, this guy named Martin Newland, who was at the Telegraph, but he came in, he was the editor for the National Post when it launched. I don't know if you remember in Canada, it was this great newspaper when it launched. It's sort of a shell of itself now. And I kind of thought, I want to work for that guy. Like really had nothing to do with Abu Dhabi or, anything like that. I wanted to live abroad. And I thought, okay, this is a really good way. I'll go for a year. I'll work for that guy and then I'll come back to Canada.
And then 17 years later.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. So interesting. So journalism took you there and has kept you there. And so, give us a little background of like how you got into journalism, what your role as a journalist has been like.
Well, I always wanted to be a journalist, I guess. And when I talk to people, they say, yeah, you always wanted to do that, because it's hard to remember. And, I went to university, then I started out in these little towns, and you work so hard and you cover ridiculous stories like the sheep show at the fair and so many accidents along the 401 and so much crime and mayhem. But that's kind of what you have to do to cut your teeth. It was pretty traumatic though. Now that I'm older and working through it, like I saw some really traumatic things. And then eventually I was a city hall reporter but always weaving health and wellness through. I lost my mom when I was 27. She was 53 and she had pancreatic cancer. She was a pretty unwell person. So looking back, I know I was always sort of pulled back to like, why did that happen? She was a nurse and a mainstream health person. But like I said, I'm pretty unwell. And so now it makes sense in the fullness of time that I was always pulled to health and wellness. So I have a really strong background in health and wellness, even though I've done investigative stuff and political stuff. And then when I came over to the UAE, became an editor for the first time. And I was an arts and life and features editor. And I've always been obsessed with like digital. And I adopted everything along the way. When my colleagues were complaining about it, I was like, okay, like I got the first blog and I was doing doing video. And so this time to be a journalist still, and to be able to do it in such a cool way in using content like across every platform, it's kind of interesting because when I became an editor and I was putting out a news section and we had blogs and we had social media, when I think of doing Hot Flash now, I'm like, in a way, I've been kind of like preparing for this in my whole life, I had, because when you were young, you had to choose broadcasting or print, and I didn't want to, so I did both of them. And now I know why.
And you said hot flashing. So let's just let our listeners know what it is you're talking about for those that might not know.
Okay, so I had a really heck of a time in my 40s when I moved over here. I always had gut issues, but early 40s things just started to fall apart. And a lot of the issues that you have in early perimenopause, like sleep and mood and, panic attacks and nightmares. I had a really hard time. And then, all just the weirdly weird symptoms. I didn't know about perimenopause. So when I realized that I was in perimenopause, I started to just put a Google alert, because that's what I do when I'm interested in things. And I just didn't like the content that was coming back. And I started thinking there's so much here, and I feel like it's going to blow wide open, because I felt like my age, I don't know how old you guys are, but I felt like Gen X was just not going to have it, was just not going to be embarrassed or ashamed of ourselves. And we're also like younger, kind of like seeming. So I just felt like, and I felt like menopause was gross when I was in my 40s, and I just never wanted to be in it, So I started a platform, and I didn't, it's just one of those things where I didn't think about money. I didn't think about how to make money. I didn't think about anything but like, I just want to start it. What's the easiest way to start it? I took one business course, and they said, your minimum viable product. I always liked Gwyneth Paltrow as a business person, and she did Goop. And I thought, okay, like I'll do a newsletter, and then we'll see where it goes. And we were talking before we started recording about tenacity and how you've recorded almost 100 episodes, and it's just consistency. And it was never really a hard thing. Like it just came out of me. And I remember someone saying, like, do you think you'll have enough to cover? And I was like, enough to cover? Like it's endless, because it's midlife, and it's trauma, and it's medical, and it's holistic. And so it's been kind of gratifying to see it explode while I've been doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're talking, and so you have tell us about the different avenues. You have a podcast. Is there a blog with this? Kind of give us
Yeah. So I have a newsletter that I moved over to Substack quite early. And so Substack kind of has its own blog. I also have a website. I have a podcast, and my space. So it was interesting, because when I started out, I saw like Dr. Mary Claire Haver on TikTok with like as many followers as I, you know what I mean? Like we were right. And Tamsin, but I saw these people blow up because they've taken a very like sort of one road, right? Like I like there's people who've taken like, well, Mary Claire Haver's a doctor, so she's not the same as me, but I am a journalist. So I'm not, I knew early on, if I talk about nothing but hormone therapy, I will get really big, really fast, but I can't, because it's just not me. And so I just occupy a space of nuance. So it's grown more slowly, but that's just me. And that's just the way I have to be authentic to myself. I just can't pretend that there isn't a whole world out there of people who aren't using hormone therapy. That's a totally, totally valid approaches. And there's different belief systems about what menopause is. And, so anyway, I just always like to explain that, because I feel like I have, there's people that have started when I did, and they have like 1 million followers, and they're on Oprah.
Yeah, it's easy.
They're just not good at it.
And what I hear you saying is, you're not saying I have the answer, like the magic answer, but that it's so much. Yeah, and that does sell, and that sells so easily. So, and as a journalist, I'm sure that I definitely want to delve into that, because that's got to be a challenge, because you have this, I'm sure, because of your journal, and I want to hear about that, how journalism has led you to have that more, okay, let me look at this big picture, at the broader perspective, versus, okay, let's find the magic answer and go out here and sell it. So how has journalism affected your approach?
Well, I mean, 30 years of going into rooms, going into places and situations and stories, and thinking I had a rough idea of what was going on, and then talking to a range of people and realizing that there's 10 sides to every story. And if there was any like conflict in my career, it was just sort of like always not sensational, like having the headline on the story, and I'd be like, oh God, that headline just makes it seem like it's and it's so complicated. But I've gone into so many places not knowing what's gone on. I have to just listen. I have to just like figure it out, right? I can't walk in, and many journalists do. but I'm not that kind of journalist. So I'm just way more open to all, like all approaches and there's just so many different truths. Like take menopause, like you it depends who you talk to, what they think. And, you know, if you're taking a medical view, if you're taking an Ayurvedic view, if you're taking a homeopathic view, if you know, there's people who say that you should get your hormone levels to where they were perimenopause, so you have your period for the rest of your life, and that is extremely healthy, and that will make you live longer and reduce your risk for disease. And there's people who say don't even eat chickpeas or flaxseed because they're estrogenic. Like I just wrote out I'm working on an HR tool that I'm going to sell, like a digital tool, and I just wrote out the spectrum that's been in my mind, like just rattling around, and I was like, wow. Like the different parameters just of hormone therapy, that spectrum. So it's, you know, we live in a world that's very polarized. And if you have had the algorithm going for, you know, we all have for like maybe how long now since Instagram has been out? I mean, it's over a decade, almost 2015. I maybe had it since. Anyway, we've been going on Facebook for a long time. The algorithms are going for a long time. And I really I was a pretty left-leaning person, and I dated a Republican ex-army, ex-military guy over here. And he thought, of course, he was conservative. So that experience for 2 years just opened my eyes to how I was getting information and how he was getting information. And so I started following some of the things that he did and getting some of the newsletters that he did and it changed really everything for me, because I was sort of going down a road of being like a real now I'm just a centrist, but that sort of evolved also my approach, because, you know, even during COVID, I was very moderate. And there were people, you know, yelling at you if you were a little bit vaccine hesitant to get the vaccine. And there were people who were telling you, you know, this is all a plan and it's all a scam. And all those people had an agenda, and there was like, you could just sort of see it. So anyway, that was a tangent, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just,
no, I think that tangent is very appropriate to helping us, because we don't realize how much, most of us don't realize that we're curating our own feeds. By what we are interested in and what we go and look up. The internet world, whether it's social media, no matter what medium we're on, it's going to feed us more of the same kind of thing.
And it's like you're in your own world.
We're literally in our own worlds. And I love how you said, I do the same thing where I like to go and look at things that are totally outside of what I think that my belief system is, just to make sure I'm not living in that bubble. And it really does open my eyes and helps me just I think it helps us to have a better, well-rounded knowledge and understanding of our fellow citizen or person that's around us that may think totally different. Like, it's so hard when you're living in your own world or your own silo to even understand. It's like talking two different languages otherwise. So it really, it's like learning more languages in a way.
It is really, and you have to be, I'm very wary of people who are too certain. That's definitely, like, I get, like, even some of the doctors I steer away from now that I was following more, because I just think there's no way you can know that. That's not really decided. And the other thing that started out in my journalism career, and when I say I'm a recovering journalist, I'm very aware of my role that I played in the journalism world of instilling fear in people. That's like paralyzing them and sort of shipping them into a direction, you know, to like buy things or do things. And I think whenever I didn't understand what was going on with the story, I would just sort of clarify things for myself by asking, well, who gains financially or who gains power in this scenario? And I see this in the menopause space as well. There's a lot of, I also love the crypto space. I have two really weird obsessions. So I love the crypto and blockchain space, but they call it FUD, like fear, uncertainty, and doubt over there. But you definitely see it in the menopause space. And it feels like really unfair as a woman, because I feel like I never really got to like enjoy my life with the noise out there. And then the noise has just shifted into like all of a sudden all these risks and all these things that are going to happen to me. And I don't want people to fall prey to it, because it's all about business. And there's really big organizations with a lot of money creating messaging that's then filtering down through influencers who aren't responsible about the way they relay information. They have no problem taking money and saying certain things. And so these things are all happening on social media and in the media, because when you open a newspaper, I can see like any company that's mentioned in menopause, I can see they've had PR pitching that story. That's why they're quoted. That's why their expert is quoted, because they've paid a marketing agency and had relationships. Like I sound like a real conspiracy theorist, but a lot of there's so little organic expert opinion these days that also shapes what you're hearing and then what you're deciding. And we're deciding really important things like, should we go into hormones? What should we do about our health? These are decisions that will impact the rest of our life. And I just want people to have like the actual information, and to realize that what you see and read isn't always it.
Yeah, and the problem is there's an element of truth, but it's not the whole truth. And there's no nuance. And so there's no balance. So how would you suggest someone that's not a journalist, someone that's not a medical person, when we're talking about menopause, for example, and creating better health solutions for ourselves, how do we make decisions? How do we parse out all that's coming in?
We're going to interrupt this interview for just a second because we've got something we want to make sure that you know.
If you're struggling with your health, with your fitness, if you don't know where to start or you know what to do and you're not doing it, we're here for you.
And all you need to do to get our help is to reach out to Shawna and I at our email, sapodcast23@gmail.com. And we're happy to help and we will be in touch. Now back to the show.
So hard. It's so hard. Well, first of all, I would not engage with anyone who is trying to make you scared about your own body. Anyone who's saying that you were born with some sort of system set to time out at 50, it simply isn't right. It just doesn't. Like, I've spoken to evolutionary biologists. This is just a crazy, like, saying that we're in a deficiency. That's a medical scenario. That's what people are taught in medical school, but it's not true. It just is not true. That doesn't make any sense either, that men would be born just fine and we would be born to tap out. We were meant to go through menopause. There are evolutionary advantages for it, but maybe it wasn't meant to be so difficult. There's quite a mismatch going on. And I think a lot of the estrogen in our environment and all the toxins are probably making it harder, including like our modern stressful life. But I think just, first of all, just if someone's saying menopause is a disease or a deficiency and that you can correct it with estrogen, like I've spent so much time trying to make like all this stuff that I think about simpler. But I think when you're even before perimenopause, I think it would be very, very, very helpful to get a question straight in your mind. Are you going to believe that losing your hormones is the problem, or that losing your hormones might reveal the problem? So if you are going to be sold, and it's very convenient, and you can imagine who's going to make money by telling you that you losing your hormones is the problem. But this tracks back to, I have the solution. Yes, and you must do it. Or if the hormones diminishing and fluctuating, if that reveals the problem, then you can still take hormone therapy because we have modern tools available to us, but then you have a whole array of options. If you say that hormones diminishing are the problem and we were built with some sort of defect, you're always going to be looking outside of yourself you're always going to need to replace. And when, really the evidence doesn't back that up, except mainstream medicine, that is their largely explanation for menopause. And, I think there's been a lot of influence in how that's taught by the pharmaceutical industry. And when I see someone like, I saw someone holding like a car and like an empty parking space. And it was like, this is your estrogen receptor and the estrogen has nowhere to go. Like, it's just so much more complicated than that. But it's really hard because that message just makes so much sense, right? It just makes so much sense. Like, oh, okay. And when you're struggling, I know when I'm struggling, you're just like, I just want the thing. I don't want to have to sit here and figure this all out. But I just think if you go on something like hormone therapy, it's great to understand it and understand what it's doing in your body. I even my friends don't know certain things about the hormone therapy that they're on. They don't know that their combination patches, progestin, synthetic progesterone, not bioidentical, biosimilar progesterone, then the synthetic has more risks. They don't, I think those are things that we need to know, but you won't get that information from your doctor. So
yeah, and then making an informed decision, because the balancing, like, okay, I'm having this risk, but my life is untenable, and so I'm willing to take on that risk. And that is, everyone's journey is a little bit different. And so the black and white, you shouldn't, it, like, just that overarching principle that everyone should do this, everyone should do that. Correct.
No.
Yes.
And I'll never say it. There's someone that I talk to, and there's a lot of people in the bioenergetic field. They're not fans of estrogen. They're fans of progesterone if you take anything. And, it's a friend of mine, and this is the one thing we don't agree on. She's like, no, she just thinks that I'm wrong. And I'll eventually come around to agree with her about estrogen. And I'm like, I won't, because my best friend went on estrogen and started sleeping. Another friend just went on estrogen and started sleeping. Like, I have people in my life whose lives have been transformed by it. So there clearly is a role, like, absolutely. And this is what I'm saying when I plot this thing out. You've got these people here, and everyone's sure that they're right. And we just don't have any space for this. We don't have any time for it. Like, we just need to find the solution. I just want people to be making their decisions based on the right information. And among the doctors that are on social media, they're kind of happy to play a bit fast and loose with the facts and the information and the evidence, saying that hormone therapy prevents cardiovascular disease and dementia when that's far from established. And there's so many variables, like, that's just one example. Using data from women who've had surgical menopause to tout the benefits of estrogen and hormone therapy, when that makes no sense. That doesn't apply to people who haven't had surgical menopause, hysterectomies. That happens all the time. And it makes me crazy, but it's so complicated. Like, all day I've been working on doing a reel about it, and it just keeps like
yeah. It's like, oh, how do you narrow that down?
Yeah.
And I just find it so dangerous. Like, I am grateful for the doctors that you've mentioned, one in particular that has brought menopause to the forefront. But then it has, like you said, follow the money. Where has it grown from there? Why has she grown? And what's the messaging that people like her are providing? The skewed messaging that then also fills her pocket with selling supplements. And there are a few creators, for example, on social media that I do want to follow, like Dr. Jen Gunter, who just calls it. And she could be making money hand over fist, but refuses to. But she knows how easy it is to white label a supplement. There's no regulation for supplements. And so then you could just be, and then when a doctor says, this is what you should have, well, and it's just it's the Wild West. And it's
supplements are a whole other area. Lately, I've been on a real supplement train, because I don't know if Gen X is like this. Like, I took so many supplements, and like, in the last year, as I lost my father. And so and then I started a new job, and I was doing hot flash. It was a very hard time. I was very tired, right? Like, obviously that's a lot, what I just told you. Also trying to stay in shape. But I just was so tired. So I took 2 supplements along the way that really harmed me. Like, they were not good for me at all. Yeah. And so I sort of did a podcast recently about my supplement journey. Like, I've noticed my friends, and I got a lot of feedback to the episode where we're just like, okay, I think we've grabbed these supplements. Like, I'm going to take these, and I'm doing something, and it's almost like a security blanket. And, I just think supplements can do a lot of harm. They really can. We can't all take the same supplements. Like, everyone tells you to take ashwagandha. Everyone tells you to take turmeric. Those are 2 supplements I cannot handle. I'm a very sensitive person. to anything that like that. And so that's just an example. When I was healing my gut, my doctor told me to take both those things. I wasn't getting better. And when this is just one example. And maca, the supplement I hurt myself on last year was maca because I was so tired. And maca like does impact your hormones. And I do think it helps you make estrogen. And I just had this terrible 2 weeks, like just awful. Like I didn't sleep. I was a terrible mood. And so I was putting maca in my smoothie every morning in perimenopause. And because it was good for me and I researched it, but what was I doing? Like, and you never stop and think, oh, it's this healthy thing.
Yeah.
So I'm really nervous about supplements, and I don't know, even something like collagen, I am not sure. Like some people say, oh, you need the 5 kinds of collagen, and then you need this with it. It needs the tryptophan with it. And then collagen. And then I just read a study. It's like collagen basically does nothing. There's no way that and I was like, pardon? I spend money on collagen. So
I think that one of the things that I hear from clients about supplements is, well, they're safe. It's a supplement, so it's healthy, it's natural, or those are the things that I'm hearing, and people don't realize the dangers that can be involved in taking those things that may sound so healthy
and benign. That if they don't help, then they're not going to hurt, but they actually could.
Yes,
I mentioned supplements with doctors, but also that goes for menopause. Hormone therapy as well, because some are just like, this is the be all end all. Everyone must. And so, it's funny because it's just so typical how the pendulum swings, WHI, early 2000s, like, no. And now like there's some doctors that are just like, everyone should be. The only thing I've really heard about everyone should be is like vaginal estrogen or, and that, because it's not systemic, but otherwise it is just not every man for themselves, every woman for themselves, in terms of like what's right for you. And so social media and even news outlets are really affecting how women are making health decisions.
Yeah, they really want women to go on hormone therapy, and we know why, right? And one thing, there's a doctor that I was looking at her comments, someone I won't share anymore. Like there's a few doctors I won't share anymore. I think they're really irresponsible, and I think they have a huge agenda, and they're in it to win it. And there's not that many. I'll share almost, all the ones we know. But I looked in her comment section, a lady said, I'm taking estrogen and I'm having such a hard time. My breasts are so sore. And she said, you need a higher dose. And I wanted to say, what? No, breast pain is from high estrogen. And this is another area where this medical approach of put estrogen into your body in perimenopause when your estrogen is already high and your progesterone is low. I mean, that can feel not good at all. Yeah. And that's crazy, right? Like, that's crazy that I could be interviewing a doctor who thinks that's okay to do. And I'm a journalist and I've never been to medical school. And I'm thinking, I don't know. There's people over here really successfully treating women in perimenopause with just progesterone, and you'll hear doctors say, oh, like, don't listen to your doctor if they say estrogen is only for after menopause. But there's actually like wisdom behind that. There's wisdom behind that. And those doctors can be made fun of who are a little bit more cautious about giving people estrogen. So I think that's just that news is just getting out too, that estrogen is actually maybe not the best thing in perimenopause. And I've been coming up with a sort of I'm not a doctor, but I've been coming up with like the low and slow approach, like the low and slow and maybe no approach. Because why not see if you just maybe take progesterone and then maybe layer estrogen and see how they feel, right? Going on them. There's no reason for not doing that. But if you go in with both, you don't know. So,
and which worked. It's like changing two variables. So and I think maybe there's two things going on. And one is that women, like the doctor is the doctor, so they know everything. And then the other thing is that, some doctors just won't even address it. So even getting your doctor to listen to anything is very difficult for a lot of people. They don't have great care. And then the other thing is that if they do, then they may be afraid to question because, the doctor is supposed to have all the answers, and they may feel.
And then there's those that don't trust doctors as well
Yes.
at all. So they won't listen to the doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm a little bit more in that camp, but for sure, I think at this age, we're being called to be more discerning about who we put our faith and trust in. And I think it's a wider issue, right? Like I know in my life, I've been working on that with financially and who I just choose to work with and with my friendships. And so I think it's actually something that we're being called to do. And so, I say like follow several people and you'll see like across the spectrum and you'll see the different opinions and then you can keep your eyes open to it. And, go into your doctor like you're a journalist and you're not leaving until you have the information that you need. Who cares if you irritate them? Like we're so over functioning, sort of like people pleasers. And like, I know this is a hard muscle to flex, but it will only do us good if we do it. And, my mom was a nurse and I grew up with her complaining about the doctors. And so I don't have as much of like, as other people do. But I think, they're people just like us and there's some that were great and there's some that keep learning and there's some that don't. And so you just have to know that when you go in. And fortunately, healthcare systems are not great in Canada. I mean, you can barely even get a doctor. So you kind of get what you get, but you can do a lot of your own research without too much time. I know it's hard to say that because where do you start if you don't even know? Like,
yeah. And I feel like it's improving.
Yep.
Like I feel like my daughter is going to have a better time of it than myself, for example. Like we're paving the way for, there's a lot of bumps in the road right now. And the pendulum is just swinging wildly. And I feel like over time, like, in 20 years, 30 years, when my daughter is in that position that, she needs some answers, like she can be finding answers now. So it's only going to get better. This is the optimist in me, although media is kind of depressing in the way that it is so skewed. And
it's not a terrible thing. It doesn't have to be. Like, what if she made I'm going to do a course later this year, like perimenopause game plan. What if you had a game plan before? Because everything you iron out before you get to perimenopause will make your perimenopause experience better. And there's still women who say, I've had nothing. Yeah. I'm perfectly fine, so, and in years, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make this point. Cause when I started, I was like, I want everyone to be able to say menopause without anyone getting weird. Well, 5 years later, like I just saw a lady popping a bottle of champagne because she went through menopause on Instagram. I was like, okay, sorry to interrupt.
No,
that's awesome. That's
point. Because even, like in my 40s, it was kind of like on the DL, because if you were in menopause, you were old and wizened up and, it was just like you're way past your expiration date. And so you kind of wanted to not like bring it up or acknowledge it. And so now, it's in everyday conversation. Men are talking about it. So it is part of the conversation now. And we have some of those influencers that I'm frustrated with that are monetizing it and taking advantage of women. We have them to thank for bringing it to the forefront. But now
1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. So they did us a service in that regard. But then I'm always telling women that you just have to keep your eyes open and follow the money. Like for every person that you have an encounter with, what's their end agenda? If their end game is, I want to educate you, I want to provide you options, then that's probably the person to listen to rather than, hey, you need to buy this.
Yeah. Like just even think of fitness. I got really, I'm a lifelong exerciser, but I got really confused about fitness because the lift heavy, I'm not really a fan of lifting heavy weights. Like it's not, but I am a fan of moving and lifting weights. And I used to like Tracy Anderson and I did this, trampoline workout with sort of lighter weights. And then I started to think, well, that's not worth it. And I got all twisted up. Yeah. And I interviewed a couple of people and their trainers and their advice is always like, get a trainer. Well, I started to realize, of course they're going to say get a trainer, but that's not very available to very many people. Even I do not want to spend money on a personal trainer. Like I'll spend money maybe for a private boxing lesson now and then, but I'm not that's too much money. Like that's not where I want to spend my money. I don't want to sit and work out with someone either and make small talk with them. That's sort of a nightmare to me. And so that get a trainer. Well, you would say that you're a trainer, like you know, and you need, making some big science out of a progressive load where it really is just like doing a little bit more every day, every time you work out, doing it for a bit longer, doing it a bit heavier. And I recently had Stuart Phillips on the podcast. He's a kinesiology prof at my old university, McMaster. He was great. And he just really broke it down. Like it's just consistency. There's no evidence that the full heavy is like the only way to go. And that's one of the things that's happening now, these narratives. And it's really just like everyone's got no original ideas. So people start saying one thing and then a bunch of people do it. And then it's like, you know, weighted vests. There's no evidence that weighted vests like help you build muscle or do really anything.
But
it's just another,
you can sell a weighted vest and you can't sell push-ups.
No.
Right? I mean, we've had Stuart Phillips on. We love him.
Oh, have you? Okay. He's so good.
Coming back. Like he is one of the voices that people need to listen to because he's selling education. He's selling you options and nuance rather than the black and white. And you know, it's so frustrating when you hear the LHS group, the lift heavy shit group, that's the only means to progress. And that disables so many people because they're like, they don't have access. They're afraid to lift anything heavy. So then they go sit down when they could be benefiting from lighter lifting or other movement patterns that are going to increase their bone density and their muscularity and their moods and all the other benefits that exercise provides.
And I'm gonna push back and say, and Shawna and I are trainers, full disclosure. So this is one of the reasons I do encourage people to get trainers. It's because my clients come to me with all this stuff that they've seen.
Yes, I agree. I don't mean to trash. I know, but I don't mean to.
No. But they do. They come to me. I just got the question about a weighted vest, I think yesterday, and it's. So people don't know how to discern when they're seeing all these things. And so, and it is like Stuart, he's a researcher. I mean, there is science, there is research behind these things that
you're going to live heavy.
If you're with someone who's truly looking at those things and not just on the latest trend, because fitness is so trendy. And I think menopause might be kind of in that boat now too, but fitness is so trendy. And Shawna and I have been in the fitness industry forever. So we know things come, they go.
Oh, you guys know. Yeah.
Yeah. We've both been in the industry over 30 years. And it's like, oh my gosh, we've seen every gadget that there is being sold to women. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, the best shape I've ever been in my life was when I had a trainer. So that's probably, and the hardest I've ever worked. So that's probably, I have a bit of, but also, if you're going to lift heavy weights, I really think you should have a trainer because I have friends who've injured themselves trying to lift heavy weights in the gym. I think that is very, I think you should have someone who's teaching you how to do that. I don't think the average person. The other thing I wanted to say is I don't think a lot of people realize that people in the fitness industry have a lot of psychological issues. And I'm not saying you guys, I'm saying there's a lot of trainers.
We know.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of people who are not okay with their bodies telling you about your body. And I don't think people realize that. And sometimes I interview people and I'm like, this person's not okay with their body. And I feel a bit uncomfortable about showcasing them. It's just the way it is, right? Like we all have issues with our body, but I ran a health and fitness platform here for 5 years for someone else. And that just surprised me so much all the time. I would be interviewing these glamazon, beautiful women. And then they'd say later that they had binge eating disorder, and I just be like, oh, wow. Yeah.
And the fitness industry makes money off of our insecurities. That's the whole game. The whole marketing around fitness is and menopause, that you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're getting old, you're aging,
it's never stopped. I'm getting really angry lately. I'm so happy menopause has a better platform, but I've been angry at some of the doctors, the way they talk about us and the way they talk about our bodies and grip strength and toe strength. And you have to do 11 push-ups or, I've said it's like a bar and I've just always been chasing it. And I just I can't anymore. I'm trying to just love the body I have. I'm trying to keep it mobile and toned, and it's exhausting. And so you guys know, like, as much as I do, when you're perusing the world, how you spot people in your niche, and you're just like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us about the headlines. I want to hear more about, like, because you are the expert on this, because you've worked in this industry with journalism. And I think it would be interesting for our listeners, then this may be helpful. How do these headlines get written, and what is the purpose? Because no matter what the topic is, menopause, fitness, politics, whatever, we see these headlines. Can you speak to headlines and what we need to be looking for or not looking for, or what the purpose of these headlines is?
Well, I'm kind of a conspiracy theorist, but I can just go with what I know from my side. So say when I was at the National and I was a features editor and arts and life editor, I'm getting the press releases, right, from brands. And brands are now everything. Brands have all the money. Brands are giving content to journalists. There's a much less content gathering. Brands are taking photos. Newspapers are just using them. That would have never happened. When I was starting out in journalism, you wouldn't interview an expert from a brand. You wouldn't, like my editor would say, go find a different expert. They're making money. So are they an expert that's been hired by a hormone therapy company? They're not the person you should talk to about hormone therapy. I wouldn't even present that expert. Now it's normal. It's absolutely normal. I even was contacted by a hormone therapy, well, indirectly, and then directly by a hormone therapy company to write an article for the LA Times that had already been arranged, that I just needed to drop the name of that hormone therapy company into it. So that just shows you the back. Like, you can open a newspaper and just sort of see the imprint of those PR firms. So if you ever see a brand in the newspaper, it's really unlikely that came there because the journalist was like, I'm going to go find that brand and ask them a question. And then the brand,
and not even a newspaper, because people aren't reading, newspaper. But
I know, I'm using that as old school. Yeah, social media. So they come up.
Media.
They're like, I worked with two guys when we started in the National. These two British guys, they were awesome, and I think they just came to the National to like be there for a year and then start their empire, their PR agency. They're so funny and they're so successful, and they're such good storytellers. So Greg would phone me up and say, okay, like, why don't we do our story about this? He'd tell me what the story was, right? And I would always laugh when I was listening to him. I'm like, God, he's so good at this. And sometimes you'd be like, yeah, that is a good story. We'll do that. Very rarely, though, you know what I mean? So they'll come to you with the angles, but they're the angles that sell the product. So that's happening indirectly with the pharmaceutical industry all the time. And I hear on social media, and I'm going to start saving these, but I wish I had. But in the 5 years, I've heard messaging that I know isn't coming from the doctor that's saying it, because I've heard another doctor say the exact same thing a week before. Compounded hormones are a scam. That's something that was going around a couple of years ago. Well, if compounded hormones are a scam, why did that same doctor show off her hormones and had a compounded testosterone? I guess it's only a scam if there isn't a pharmaceutical option available. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just one example. Natural is a weapon to keep women in their place. That's a phrase that's been floating around, but I saw multiple doctors say it around the same time. To me, that says that someone has contacted them, said, hey, we're doing this, you know what I mean? And so just one way, if you're going to talk headlines, that's kind of, I sometimes even think there was some sort of resurgence or effort after it had been long enough, after the Women's Health Initiative, on the part of the pharmaceutical industry. They hire very high priced, PR firms and marketing firms. This is what they do, create messaging. And, I imagine, I'm just guessing, but I imagine at some point it was like, it's been long enough, let's start the push for hormone therapy. That's fine. Like, that's fine. More women needed to find out about hormone therapy. Yeah. But that's how it happens, and someone, like, there was a doctor in the UK who wanted to rebrand menopause as a female hormone deficiency syndrome, and she hired a PR firm, and the PR firm started posting about it, and there was quite a backlash. And this is a doctor who sells, has a private clinic and sells hormone therapy. And then, I sometimes wonder, I used to think I was such a good trend spotter, but I just think I was spotting, like, marketing, I wasn't that, like, sometimes I think I was spotting trends, but I think mostly I was spotting. So that's how it happens. It's companies hire PR firms, then they tell a story. And so we're all embedded now in this story that often do to make someone else money.
So it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. Whereas before you were sniffing out a story, and now it's the opposit. Like
now I'm like, And here's recently. So I'm often sitting here in my apartment in Abu Dhabi going like, what? So something I saw recently was, Stuart Phillips will talk about a lot of the claims about hormone therapy and muscle. They're not really backed up in the evidence. But that didn't, that people have been still making claims about how, you lose weight and you'll build muscle more easily. And multiple doctors and people on social media have now been saying, yes, hormone therapy was so good for me for weight loss, but for getting in shape. But what's really put me over the edge is the GLP-1 that I'm on now, the stack. And so to me, that was like, I don't know that someone just came up with that stack on their own. Maybe they did, but it's weird that I've seen it all in a couple of weeks, a couple of so I thought you told me that hormone therapy would do the trick, that it was the magic bullet, but now there's another layer,
Wait, and that's the sale. That is definitely the sales thing, because it's just like we see diets, they just get rebranded and renamed and it just comes out again. And now it's the new thing that we did, so many years ago. It's it's just,
yeah.
Meanwhile, people in the Mediterranean are just like the healthiest they've ever been, in the blue zones in the way they eat.
Yeah, because a lot of times people are just looking for the pill, but it really comes down to, hey, you can have results with hormone therapy, without hormone therapy, but if you have these lifestyle habits in place. So there's work behind every avenue, and then you just choose which road you're going to go down. But the main thing is that for optimal health, like, let's look at nutrition, your sleep, your
if you're not sleeping, you can't. And stress. Like if you're I've been in a really intense, stressful period for 2 months, and I'm reminded of how much it messes with me, like in every way. And my gut will start going, I'll be like, what did I eat? It doesn't matter. If I'm not stressed out, I can have whatever I want, within reason. So stress, but sleep, and that's where hormone therapy comes in, because there's so many women who just aren't sleeping, and you can't get it together. So this is where I'll never say, there's this whole posse of people who believe that women are just messed up, and that's why they're having their perimenopause symptoms. And if they would just get their nutrition dialed in, and their fitness dialed in, and their sleep dialed in, then they could be as healthy as these women are. And then it's like, but they can't do that, because they have kids, and they have their parents, and they have their jobs, and they have, they're going through hard stuff, maybe a divorce, like, you experience this with your clients. So
yeah. And so, so there is no one answer. There are a multitude of answers, but parsing out what that answer is for you. And I think you've given us, a lot to think about in terms of how we're consuming media, how we need to have a broader perspective, and not just like one person is the be all end all. And this, because and the person that is the most certain is probably the person that you need to maybe steer away from. And even though they seem the most confident, having someone that questions is probably your better person to be listening to. A bunch of people like that.
We all know those people in our life, right?
Yeah.
It's just a lot of people are really good at delivering their message, and they deserve their success. They've worked very hard. But I worry too about audience capture. If you've made your success on hormone therapy is the magic bullet that you need, or this supplement is the magic bullet that you need, then, I don't know what happens if things change for you, or, I don't know what happens if the evidence changes, if you adapt to it, or, I see a lot. The other thing I really see a lot is these people will only talk about the positive hormone therapy studies and ignore anything that isn't positive, or even like freak out about anything that isn't positive, as if it's sort of like an anti-feminist situation. And I think that's crazy. Like, I just think that's nuts.
Yeah.
That's not how information works in research.
Yeah. Fear mongering. And that is not how science works.
No.
But there has been a serious question of science these days in some areas. We won't get into that, but yeah.
Remember the people that said it's science. Like anyone who says that is just like, they don't understand. I remember I was away at a cottage with a guy that I knew a long time ago. And this was just like 2 or 3 years ago. And he said, there's nothing with gluten. Anybody can eat it. He was a super unhealthy guy, very certain. And I was just looking at him like, oh, I just think you're so wrong in so many ways. And I don't even know how to do it. You don't even know. Like, I don't know. I think his ex-girlfriend was like, worked for public health or something. And he got his information from her and he was so sure. And there's a lot of that.
Yes. Yes. If you had a wish for our listeners today, what would it be, Ann Marie?
It depends where you are in your sort of midlife transition, but I just want you to realize that you're becoming who you were meant to be and maybe who you were when you got here and you couldn't remember. Like, this is a really sacred transition. It's very, very personal for me because I spent a lot of my life, as many of us did, over-functioning, abandoning myself, putting other people first, people pleasing. And when you start like overriding that voice, thinking that other people knew better than me. And so I do believe that some of this confusion in midlife is maybe brought to us so that we can begin to exercise those muscles. It's magical when you start to realize, like, I knew that. I knew that. Like, it's not like you know everything. Of course you're curious, but that quiet voice, it was just like, I knew that. I knew that about that person. I knew that wasn't a good person. I had questions about that thing that I did but that person seemed so convincing. That journey to trusting yourself, I'm still in it, but it's really remarkable. And there's a lot more peace on the other side for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Alli?
My wish is that we will look at who we're looking at. Who are we listening to? And if they have all the answers and they're so confident, then maybe maybe we should look a little deeper and just broaden the spectrum of who we look to and listen to.
Yeah. Echo chambers don't really help anyone. Yeah.
And I obviously agree with both of you, but that menopause isn't all bad. If the cup is if you're always seeing the cup half empty, then you're always going to see the negative aspects of it. But there's a lot of gifts in menopause, and if we look for those things, then we will find them. And of course, with you, Alli, look at who you're looking at and listening to. Broaden that perspective.
Thanks for listening. You'll find me, Alli, on Instagram at Alli Kerr Fitness.
And you'll find me, Shawna, on Instagram at Shawna Kaminski. Feel free to pop us a DM with questions and or feedback. If you're enjoying the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, please subscribe and share it with other health-minded women. Ratings and reviews are also much appreciated and help us get our message out to a larger audience.
Until next time, be healthy and be happy.